The first week I moved into my dream home, a woman I'd never met marched across the street, pointed straight at me and screamed, "You don't belong here." And before I could even process what was happening, she threatened to call the police on me, in my own house. That was the moment I realized moving into this neighborhood wasn't the fresh start I'd imagined. It was a war I never signed up for. I'm Simone Rafferty, 44 years old, and after 2 decades of climbing my way up through long hours and careful saving, I finally did it. I bought a house. Not an apartment, not a rental, my own home in Plano, Texas. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. The kind of place where I thought I could breathe plant flowers and let my daughter Camille come home from college to something stable. The first morning after we moved in, I stood on the porch with my coffee and thought, this is it. I've made it. But even that first day, the air felt watched. Curtains twitched. People slowed down when walking their dogs, offering those tight, polite smiles that say everything they don't want to say out loud. And across the street, there she was. A tall woman in her 60s, white hair pulled into a tight bun, a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a badge. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just observed. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just curious about the new neighbor. But the next morning I caught her standing at the end of my driveway writing something down. When I said hello, she turned away without a word. By the end of the week, I knew her name. Lorraine Pigford, the president of the HOA. People said it like a warning, like she wasn't just a neighbor, but an institution. Still, I wanted to make things work. I baked cookies for the family next door, smiled at everyone I passed. But every time I stepped outside, Lorraine was there, watching, taking notes, whispering to whoever would listen. Then came Sunday, the day everything cracked open. I had just come home from the grocery store, arms full of paper bags, the sun hot on the back of my neck. Camille was upstairs unpacking boxes. I remember the stillness of the street, how quiet it was, like something waiting to happen. Then came the sound of heels on concrete, sharp, deliberate. When I looked up, Lorraine was marching toward me, clipboard in hand, eyes locked like she'd been waiting for this. "You need to leave this property," she barked. I blinked. "Excuse me? This is private property, homeowners only." I laughed, because what else do you do when someone says something that insane? "I live here," I said, pointing to the groceries, the keys dangling from my wrist. "I just bought this house." She didn't even glance at the keys. "That's impossible," she said flatly. "I know who lives here, and it's not you." The anger rose fast, hot and electric. "Ma'am, I signed the papers 2 weeks ago. I have the deed, the mortgage, the keys, the everything." By then, Camille had come downstairs. "Mom, what's going on?" Lorraine turned toward her, voice dripping with authority. "This woman is trespassing." Camille's jaw dropped. "This is our house." Neighbors started to gather. Doors opened, people peeked out. And there I was, standing on my own porch, being accused of breaking into my own home. I pulled out my phone, opened the email with my closing statement, held it up to her face. "You see that? My name? My address?" She didn't even look. Forgery is easy these days. Something inside me snapped. "Enough," I said. "You have no right to accuse me of anything. You are trespassing on my peace." Her lips thinned. "Then you won't mind if the police confirm it." "Call them," I said. "I have nothing to hide." So she did. When the officers arrived, they were polite but cautious. I handed them every document I had, deed, mortgage, utility bills. They checked it all, nodded, said it was clear. I thought that would be the end of it. But Lorraine stood on the curb shouting, "You're making a mistake. She doesn't belong here." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand why this woman thought she had the right to decide where I belonged. Instead, I stood there, silent, burning. Because deep down I knew the truth. It wasn't about rules. It was about control, about power, about a woman who couldn't stand seeing someone like me in a house like this. I filed a harassment report that day. I thought that would stop her. It didn't. Over the next week, Lorraine turned that clipboard into a weapon. Notes about my trash bins, complaints about my porch light, letters about HOA violations. Every morning she'd stand across the street watching, like she was waiting for me to slip up. And I'll be honest, there was a moment when she almost won. One night after Camille had gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by HOA letters and printed bylaws I didn't even understand. I started to wonder, Maybe I really had done something wrong. Maybe I should have checked the rules about bin placement or the color of the porch light or whether my mailbox met some stupid guideline. I felt small, like the house I'd worked my whole life for had turned into a stage where I was being tested and judged. I almost cried. But then I remembered my mom's voice. There are fights you don't ask for, but when they come, you either stand up or get erased. That was the night I decided I wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, Paula, one of the kind neighbors, showed up with a casserole and a story. "You're not the first," she said. "Lorraine's done this before. To the Rodriguez family, to a single mom named Tanya. She hounded them until they left." That was it. That was the moment something in me hardened. "Then she picked the wrong woman this time," I said. Because if Lorraine wanted a war, she was about to get one. When I heard she'd called an emergency HOA meeting to address the questionable occupancy on Stratford Drive, I almost laughed. She wanted to humiliate me publicly. Fine, let her try. The night of the meeting, I walked into the community center with Camille by my side and a folder full of documents. The room was packed. You could feel the tension buzzing. Lorraine stood at the podium like a judge about to deliver a sentence. She cleared her throat. "It has come to the board's attention that a resident has moved into a property under questionable circumstances," she said, her voice syrupy and cold. My hands were shaking, but I stood. "You're talking about me, right?" a few people murmured. I walked to the front, laid out my papers, and said, "Let's get this over with. Here's the deed. Here's the mortgage. Here are the utility bills in my name. Everything verified. What else do you need?" The silence that followed was thick. Lorraine's eyes darted to her clipboard. "Even if that's true," she said, "there are still multiple violations. Trash bins placed before the permitted time, porch lights left on past midnight." Camille laughed under her breath. Porch lights. Seriously. The room started to stir. People whispered. A man in the back muttered, "This is ridiculous." I looked at Lorraine and said, "Let's stop pretending this is about bins or lights. This is about control. You've been watching, following, reporting, and humiliating me since I moved in. You even called the police on me in front of my child. That's not leadership. That's harassment." The room erupted. Paula started clapping. Richard, the old man with the cane, called out, "She's right." Lorraine slammed her hand on the podium. "Order, order in this meeting." But order was gone. A man stood up. "You did the same thing to the Rodriguezes." Another voice shouted, "And Tanya Lewis, you called the cops on her too." One by one the stories poured out. People who had stayed silent for years suddenly found their voices. Lorraine's face flushed red. Her hand trembled as she gripped her clipboard like it could save her. "This is a witch hunt," she screamed. "Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart." But no one was listening. The HOA vice president, Gary, stood and said, "We're calling a vote. All in favor of removing Lorraine Pigford as HOA president, raise your hands." And then it happened. A wave of hands went up, dozens of them. Neighbors who'd once been too afraid to speak finally choosing a side. Lorraine froze. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked around the room like a queen whose crown had just been snatched off her head. Gary's voice was calm. "The majority has spoken. Effective immediately, Ms. Pigford is removed from her position." For a second the room was silent. Then came the sound of clapping, murmurs of relief, even laughter. Lorraine grabbed her clipboard, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out of the room. The door slammed so hard it echoed. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but for the first time in weeks, I felt steady. Camille squeezed my hand and whispered, "You did it, Mom." "No," I said quietly. "We did it. All of us who stopped staying silent. And that was it. No dramatic celebration, no victory parade, just quiet relief. The kind that comes when you finally take back what someone tried to steal, your dignity. Because here's the truth. Bullies don't have real power. They only have what silence gives them. And the moment you stop being afraid to speak, they lose everything.